Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today in an incredible man, Scott Ritter. Hello, Mr. Ritter. Glad to see you.
Good to see you.
Our last interview with you has gained a total of almost 2 million views. This is huge number. People like you and people appreciate your wisdom and your knowledge. And it is interesting, it is important. Many Ukrainians, not 1,000 people, but many Ukrainians, 100, 200 people, also thank you. It is important. Today I have one question, then where will be a game called Imagine Free Situation, and one short question last. My first question is, yesterday Vladimir Putin said, and I quote, Russia has not started anything seriously in Ukraine yet. I think Vladimir Putin never says anything for nothing. What do you think his words mean, and to you whom this message is sent?
Well, thank you for putting me in the very difficult position of trying to get into the mind of Russia's president. What do I think Vladimir Putin meant by this? I think he meant what he said. I think we need to understand that the Ukraine conflict is not just the special military operation, that it encompasses economic and geopolitical aspects. Right now, what we're seeing is basically the initial phase of a military operation, that is the liberation of Donbass. But we haven't seen the breaking of the Ukrainian government to the degree necessary to accomplish two stated objectives: one, denazification; two, demilitarization. We're not even close to denazification or demilitarization. And there's a lot of people who are singularly focused on the Donbass and the fighting there, saying, well, this is everything. This is what's going on. There's another aspect too. The Russians, if we recall, in the lead up to this the special military operation, made a concerted effort to engage the United States and NATO responsibly on the issue of a new European security framework, one that saw NATO withdraw its infrastructure back to 1997 levels and respect Russia's legitimate security interests in its immediate spheres of influence, such as Ukraine, Belarus, etc. We're not there yet either. And then we have to take into context that the main weapon that the West was hoping to use against Russia, in the case of a Russian invasion, was the economic weapon. That the idea of the West was to strangle Russia economically, to destroy Russia economically, and thereby to create so much disruption within the Russian state that the Russian people would remove Vladimir Putin from power. The Russians have, in a level that should make every Western economist resign their position, go back to school, and learn what global economics really is. The Russian president, together with a very capable, supporting cast. We keep talking about Vladimir Putin, and to do so ignores the reality that Russia has a very effective government, a very effective civil service that is populated by some very competent people who have done a very good job of studying the world that Russia lives in. Unlike, for instance, their American counterparts who only live in a fantasy world about how wonderful America is and how the world revolves around America, Russia has an extremely realistic appreciation of its role in the world, where it stands in the world, and how the world operates. And you see this in the Russian response economically. And I think the key to this conflict is ultimately going to be economics, meaning that Europe may collapse economically before the Ukrainian military collapses militarily. And as Europe begins to collapse economically, to give you an example, the resignation of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The Ukrainian government is in a panic because they are losing one of their biggest cheerleaders, the man who was out there in front of everybody, loudly proclaiming the support for Ukraine, promoting Russophobic attitudes, etc. He's gone. And the people who have to replace him or are being considered to replace him come from a party that is looking at defeat in the next election. And that defeat isn't going to be because of their Ukraine policies. That defeat is going to be because of failed economic policies that are a direct result of their Ukraine policies. And so I think you're going to be seeing a lot of European countries reversing course when it comes to Ukraine, saying that we need to figure out how we're going to survive. And to survive means we need to figure out how we're going to peacefully get along with Russia. How do we reestablish economic ties with Russia? How do we get that cheap Russian gas? These are going to be the critical points. And then that's where I think Putin has said, we haven't even begun yet. We haven't even begun to deliver the pain. We have so many different ways to deliver pain to Europe right now. And we will, I think what he's saying is, you're sort of the ones who get to decide how much pain you get. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. The easy way is for you to put on your thinking cap and realize you have lost. You're not going to win. Russia will prevail in Ukraine. Russia will get what it wants in Ukraine, and Russia will get what it wants in terms of a new European security framework. The sooner you realize that, the easier this will be for everybody. But if you want to continue to play stupid games, then understand you win stupid prizes. And the stupid prizes are Russia will continue to press militarily, geopolitically, economically, and Russia hasn't even begun to do everything it's capable of doing to inflict pain on Europe and the United States. The fact that Russia's not rushing to do this shows a level of maturity that doesn't exist in the West. I will say that right up front. I can guarantee you that these were Western politicians, they'd have their foot to the floor trying to accelerate as fast as possible to inflict as much pain as possible. That's why they failed economically, because they did everything at once instead of a gradual approach and then adjust accordingly as Russia responds to come in with a plan. But to have that kind of gradual approach means you have to have thought it through. You have actually had to war game this out. They didn't. They just assumed right up the front that if they hit the full economic sanction button, that Russia would collapse. They were wrong. Russia's not making the same mistake. This is a very gradual approach. Russia's allowing the West to make mistakes that Russia can then exploit, instead of rushing forward too fast, making mistakes that the West can exploit. Vladimir Putin, I know he's reviled outside of Russia. I think in Russia right now is a very high approval rating. But I will tell you this as a historian. One day the history of this is going to be written, decades from now, when people have lost the emotion of the moment. And when people talk about this period of time in the world, there are two leaders that are going to be mentioned by name in a positive fashion. One leader is China's president, Xi Jinping. The other one is Vladimir Putin. And I'm betting that Vladimir Putin is actually elevated to being the smartest, wisest, most pragmatic, most responsible global leader. That because of Vladimir Putin, the world actually avoided a major conflagration. Yes, we're at war in Ukraine. Yes, there's a potential for different conflicts. But I think the measured way that Vladimir Putin is leading Russia right now is actually preventing a wider conflict by giving the West a chance to destroy itself, as opposed to requiring Russian forces to destroy it.
Yes. Thank you, Sam. I know you like movies. I saw your speech at the Ron Paul Institute conference. It was a great performance. This is for you. Joe Biden, you are not Hey, Ritter. Fantastic job, fantastic speech.
Thank you.
Today,
You're embarrassing me, but that's okay.
today I want to play a game I call Imagine. I will give you three situation in which you need to imagine yourself. You will not be Scott Ritter, but someone else. And the first situation. Imagine that you are not Scott Ritter, you are Valery Zaluzhny, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Lieutenant. Imagine that one day Vladimir Zelensky called you to his office and said, "Please help me, I'm afraid for my life, I'm afraid for neo-Nazis, I'm afraid of CIA agent, I am afraid of Mi-6 agent who are my bodyguards. I don't know what to do. I'm not a politician. I will never be a real president. I'm an actor. I am comedian. What should I do?" As a military man, what advice would you give, and what you do in such situation? And the second part of this question, but it is no longer a game called Imagine. It is just a question: who, in your opinion, is Vladimir Zelensky? Is he bad guy? Is he victim? Is he criminal? Is he lover of money and cocaine? Who is he, in your opinion?
Well, before I play the game Imagine on this one, let me answer the question of who I think Vladimir Zelensky is.
Yes.
I think he's a human being right off the bat. He's a human. All right. That means he's not perfect. I think he's a very intelligent man. There's no doubt about it. The man is trained as a lawyer, and I respect the process required to become a lawyer. I respect the analytical thinking that's necessary. I think he's a clever man. I think he's worked the system in a way that made him a very successful actor and comedian. Very successful. I think he has a good sense of humor. I watched his show and I laughed. I thought it was, but I had to stop watching because it stopped being a parody and it started looking like reality, and it stopped being a comedy to me and started being more of an accurate reflection on Ukraine. But take a look at the things that he talked about early on, the corruption, the level of corruption that exists in Ukraine, the level of desperation on the part of the Ukrainian people. This is a guy who knows what the truth is. And I believe that he was under the impression that he would be able to make a difference as president. I mean, he was selected rather than elected. I think we need to understand that if it weren't for his backing, by certain oligarchs who controlled media institutions, et cetera, he wouldn't be where he's at. But he was able to successfully use an acting career to convince the Ukrainian people to vote for him. And before people laugh about this, Ronald Reagan was an American actor who became a very successful American president. I know a lot of people don't like him, but the Russians should remember him. He's the guy that helped bring about the end of the Cold War. He's the guy that went from the evil empire to we can be friends. So let's not mock actors who become politicians, because what is a politician? A politician should be the expression of the will of the people, and actors are people. Actors are citizens. We shouldn't denigrate them right off the bat. But it's not so much his professional background that's at play here. It's the lack of forging of a spine of steel, shall we say. There isn't much in Zelensky's background that tested him. And where you're going to be the president of a nation like Ukraine, where you have to confront corruption, you have to confront Russia, you have to confront NATO, you have to confront your own, oligarchs and politicians and your military and the various interests. You need to be somebody who's tested, somebody who has gone up to the edge of the abyss and not been afraid, somebody who has been in the fires of hell and is confident that he can continue to walk through it. Zelensky's not this man. Zelensky was never tested. And unfortunately, because he's human and not Superman, he's failed. He has failed egregiously across the board. I'm not going to pick on, rumors about drug use, et cetera. That, hey, I'll tell you what, all you perfect people out there, go be Zelensky for a day. You'll be snorting cocaine before the day's over, because that's the only option you have, because life is very hard for this man, very hard. You can't imagine the pressures he's under. And this is a man who's not been tested, a man who doesn't have the experience. It's easy to sit here and say, I hate Zelensky, or I don't like Zelensky. I don't hate him. I don't dislike him. I feel sorry for him. And I don't mean that as, as an act of pathos, that he's a pathetic character. I feel sorry that a fellow human being who was trying to do the right thing was put in a position that he's not qualified for. And that's the ultimate reality of the point. So that's what I think of Vladimir Zelensky. He's a fellow human who's been put in an impossible situation, and he doesn't have the skill set to function properly. Now we come to your imagination scenario. And the reason why I thought that I needed to answer the question about Zelensky first is because I think I know how I'm going to answer this question. First of all, the circumstances that we operate. I believe that Ukraine today is a nation that is under martial law. So it's waived most constitutional processes. President is the commander-in-chief. President gets to dictate. I think in martial law, too, the commander of the military is elevated, that he bypasses certain legislative checks and balances. So now we have the commander of the Ukrainian military being confronted by the commander-in-chief, who has suffered a total collapse, is demonstrated he is 100% incapable of governing. So I immediately place him under arrest, protective arrest. I bring in my soldiers and I say arrest, he's relieved as president of Ukraine. He's no longer president of Ukraine. I've relieved him. I want him arrested. I want him taken to a hospital. I want him placed under medical care. I want him given sedatives. I want him relaxed. And more importantly, I want him and his family protected while we investigate the charges that he's made. And then I would investigate the charges. And if I found that there were CIA or MI6 people plotting, they would be evicted from my country immediately or arrested or killed. I'm at war, man. I ain't playing games. If you're doing something that undermines my commander-in-chief, you're dead. So I will kill you. I will arrest you, or I will kick you out of the country. The same thing with any Ukrainian that was acting in a way that was unconstitutional or detrimental to the security of Ukraine. I would arrest these people, I would kill these people, but they would not be functioning. And I would announce that Ukraine is now under military rule and that we are not returning to democracy anytime soon. Then I would reach out to the Russians and say, we need a ceasefire. I'm not saying that we're surrendering to you. What I'm saying to you is the situation has fundamentally changed in Ukraine as of now. Everything that was isn't, and we don't know what's going to be. If you want to continue to fight us, I can guarantee you we will fight. You may not like the outcome. Not saying that you're going to win, but I'm saying that we might be in a position to resolve our differences peacefully if you give me a chance to figure out what's going on right now and to get together the people that I need to figure out where we're going. And what that means is maybe denazification is something we can help you with. Maybe we can help you with this one because they just threatened my president. So they're going anyways. Question is, who makes them gone, me or you? Me, I think it's better for Ukraine. You, bad for everybody. Demilitarization. If the CIA and MI6 were in fact plotting against my commander-in-chief, that means that the United States, Great Britain, and NATO are no longer my allies. They can't be my allies. So we're going to terminate this relationship. That's going to be a little difficult right now because we're in debt. We owe a lot of money. They've given us weapons, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm going to deal with that, I can't be fighting you at the same time. So you need to stop fighting me. Let me deal with this. And then we're going to talk about the future. The parliament is dissolved. There is no parliament. The Constitution is put away. We have to rebuild a nation. It's easier for me to rebuild a nation if I can give the nation hope for a future where maybe we get some of our territory back. I know you guys have captured a lot of territory, and I know you're pretty mad at us right now, and I know you're thinking, but if we can convince you that we know how to live responsibly with the Russian minority, that we respect the Russian languages and all this kind of stuff. I'm not talking about a new Minsk. It's too late for new Minsk. But I'm talking about working with you to find out how Ukraine can emerge from this as a responsible nation state that can peacefully coexist with Russia. And we will figure out how we repair our relationship with Europe. But if Europe is indeed involved in undermining the president the way the president said, then Europe's not our friend. And that's just real. I mean, this is a fantasy world. You gave a question, but that would be, if I were the Ukrainian general, that would be my response. There's no way, confronted with the scenario you presented, that Zelensky could be allowed to continue to govern. He's the commander in chief. He has to be in charge. If he had that kind of breakdown, he needs to be taken into protective custody. The charges he made could either be delusional or they could be real. They need to be investigated. And that's that.
Yes, it's interesting. The next situation. Imagine that you are not Scott Ritter, but for example, that you are Mykola Zinchenko. Are you Ukrainian and love your country? Imagine that you are not 60 years old, but 50 years old. You can be drafted into the army. Imagine that today is not summer, but winter, February 24, and today is the beginning of the special military operation. Imagine that you live in Kharkov, Ukraine. You have a wife, Marina, and 2 daughters. What have you been doing in such situation? Would you stay in Kharkov with your family, or did you try to go somewhere to Russia, to Belarus, to Poland? But remember that it is very dangerous and you will not be released abroad. And then where you drafted into the army, into territorial defense, what will be your action and thoughts about this situation, and how to protect your family, and how not to become a victim of war?
Well, I mean, let's just start with the reality. The second war starts, everybody's a victim of war. I mean, just end of story. You're a victim one way or another. A war has occurred. Okay, you laid out, I'm a patriotic Ukrainian.
Yes.
I'm fighting for my country. End of story. How old are my children? I'm 50 years old. I imagine I had them before I was 30. So my kids are in their 20s. I would have a long discussion with my wife and my children. I would encourage them to find a way to volunteer with whatever the Ukrainian Red Cross is, to work with emergency medical, emergency response. But we're a nation at war, total mobilization. So I'm going to mobilize my wife. I'm going to mobilize my children. They're going to help their country, and I'm going straight to the recruiting office, and I'm volunteering my services. I don't know what my background is. Do I have technical skills? Am I an academician? Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm volunteering my services. I'm going to go there and say, use me to the best way possible. If you need me on the front line, I'm 50 years old. I'm fat, I have bad knees, but that's where you need me, take me. If you need my brain, I can do something here. If you need me to pump gas, however you need to use me, use me. And it's total war. And that's how I approach it. You serve your country. Your country's at war. You serve your country. You serve your nation. You do not run away. You do not hide. You go to the front line and you fight. And if necessary, you die because it's war, and that's just the way the cookie crumbled.
Yes, many Russian people don't understand this about Ukrainian people, and this love your country. And last question in this imagine, and this is difficult question. Imagine you are not Scott Ritter, but you, for example, Ivan Anisimov, and you are Russian. You live in the town of Orenburg. Orenburg is a town in Russia. You are married, you have 2 daughters, and your daughter has a husband as well as a son, your grandson. For example, Sasha. Imagine that your daughter's husband is a military man and he went to serve in the Russian army in Ukraine. And imagine that he died there. And finally, imagine your grandson, a child of 9 years old, comes up to you and asks you, "Grandfather, why did my father die? What was his goal? Ukraine is a foreign country. Why was he sent there? And what did he die for? What this war? Why? How would you explain this situation to this boy, your grandson, and to answer his question?"
Well, tough question. I think I would take him to a memorial from the Great Patriotic War. And I would stand him in front of that memorial and I would explain to him about the history of his country and how at one time the entire nation came together to defeat a horrible evil. And that many, many people lost their lives, 27+ million people. And I would explain to him, that many of those people hadn't volunteered to serve their country. They were compelled to come in and serve. But then in the aftermath of the war, a nation needs a military to defend itself, to defend its interests, and a nation needs to call upon patriotic citizens to serve in the military. And many times people volunteer to do this. They say, "It's my job. My job is to protect my nation, to be the shield of my nation." And then, how do you explain it? What the military is, what it means. You do your best. You explain the duties and responsibilities. You also explain that the hope by being strong, by having the great shield, you never need to use the sword. That's the goal of the military, not to be aggressive, not to go out and conquer, but to present a shield that says, "This protects my nation. If you come too close, though, I will be compelled to use this." And then I would explain to him that the same people that my country fought in the Great Patriotic War, the same ideology, unfortunately, is alive in Ukraine. And it was that ideology had manifested itself in a way that was hurting Russian people. And that ultimately it was the responsibility now for the Russian military to take the shield and pick up the sword and go in and protect with the sword. And war is not a fair thing. It's tough and people die, people are hurt, and your father paid the price. But he's a hero. He served his nation, served his family, served you, served me, and he should be honored. We should honor him every day. Every day when we wake up, we should give a prayer to the sacrifice made by your father in service of his country, to defend his family, to defend his community, to defend Orenburg, to defend Russia, and indeed to defend the world from an odious ideology that at one time had grown out of control and swept through Russia, killing 27 million people. That's what this monument's about. This monument's about that time. Your father has helped us make sure we don't have to build another monument like this. We will build a monument to your father. It will be for a different war, a different time, a different cause, but it won't be this war. It won't be a resurrection of this war, because people like your father had the courage, the honor, the commitment, and the love of nation to join the military. And when called upon, they made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of their country. Even though it was in Ukraine, it was in defense of your country, trying to defend fellow Russians from an evil ideology. That would be the talk I think I'd have. Wouldn't be an easy talk.
Yes.
But that'd be the talk I'd have.
Thank you, sir. And my last short question. How long have you been in Russia? Do you have a desire to visit Russia?
I first went to Russia in June of 1988. And I fell in love with Russia immediately. Moscow was a different city then than it is today, so I have no clue what Moscow's like today.
Yes.
But it was beautiful then. It was the Moscow that I imagined would be the capital of the Soviet Union. Clean, big streets, big buildings, populated by people I wasn't expecting. I was expecting communists to be more cold, no humor. I found people who were alive and well and just having living life like we were. Then I went to Vodkinsk, and I mean, what an eye opener! What an eye opener! I learned from the start that Russia was not a wealthy nation like the United States in terms of consumer-driven wealth. But Russia was a rich nation in terms of the wealth of its people and the humanity that they had. What a wonderful people, wonderful people. And, I studied, I think I frustrated the heck out of the KGB because I spent a lot of time in the Vodkinsk library. And I would go to the town of Vodkinsk library, which is the factory library, to get books about the Civil War in that area. I wanted to know how the Russian Civil War was fought in the Vodkinsk, Izhevsk, Udmurt region. And they had books, and I was able to get the books. But I'm sure the KGB was sure I was up to something. Why is this guy going to the library? But I did that for roughly 2 years, from June of 1988 until July of 1990. And I didn't just stay in Vodkinsk. I had the opportunity to go to Ulan-Ude, to Novosibirsk, to Kansk. Where I've never been to St. Petersburg. I've studied St. Petersburg like it was, my hand. I took seminars on it in college, studied the architecture, studied the history, studied the monuments. Haven't been there, would love to. Had the opportunity to go to Volgograd, Stalingrad, as a precursor to going to Kapustin Yar, which is where they were blowing up missiles. But I got diverted to another mission. You're in the military, you have to salute. But I would have loved to go to Stalingrad. I've studied that battle. I've studied the history of that city. I want to see the monument. I just want to be there and breathe it in. I've studied Russian history so much that I just feel like when I close my eye, you said Orenburg. I've studied the Orenburg Cossacks. I understand, where that city's located. I understand its history. You mention a place in Russia, I'll close my eyes and I'll imagine what it's like. I want to experience it. Yeah, I want to live it. I want to breathe it. To Georgia, when it was part of the Soviet Union, Sukhumi, where my wife is from. Unfortunately, there's a tragedy about Georgia, about Abkhazia, about Sukhumi. So I've seen that aspect. The last time I was in Moscow was in 1991, right after the coup, but before the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was already changing. It wasn't the city that I had experienced 3 years prior. And I followed with when I say great interest, I don't mean exultation, but the interest that you give to when a loved one is sick. I followed the collapse of the Soviet Union and what happened in Russia throughout the 1990s. I haven't been back to Russia. I would love to go back to Russia. It's, I feel like I have many journeys in Russia that I need to complete so that I can when I close my eyes, it's not just artificial memories, but real memories that I have of it. But no, I just have a great appreciation for Russia. I'm realistic. I don't pretend that Russia's perfect, not by any means. When I say I've studied the history, I've studied the history, the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't come in with rose-colored glasses. I don't pretend that that everything is songs and flowers. That's the beauty of a nation. That's the beauty of a people, is to understand the totality of their circumstance. Because you can't say you know Russians if you don't understand the totality of their circumstance. Just like you can't say you know Americans if you don't understand the totality of our circumstance. If you come to the United States and think that we're all about riches, we're all about, two cars and all that, you don't know America. You don't understand the daily struggle of what it means. You don't understand what working 60, 70, 80-hour work week is to earn enough money so you can have those two cars in the garage. America's a complicated country. Russia's a complicated country. America's a beautiful country. Russia's a beautiful country. I've had limited experience in Russia. I'm 60 years old. I'm closer to the checking out lane than I am from the checking in lane. So I'd like to see a lot more of Russia before I check out. I don't know if that will happen. Unfortunately, the relations between our two countries aren't that good right now. I don't have that much time on this earth. I don't know if I can wait 20 years for relations to get better, but who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But yeah, I've been to Russia. I love Russia. Not as much as I love America. I'm an American. Never forget that. I never forget that. But I respect Russia, and I would certainly like to see more of Russia before they put me 6 feet under.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ritter. Thank you so much. I hope this format of the conversation was not very difficult for you, and I hope that it helped you to understand some thoughts and ideas. And thank you so much, and welcome to Russia. Any moment, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So.